how do herbs improve cognition? Like, actually, biologically, what goes on in the body in order to improve cognition, and what actual science is there around this? Because there's a lot of marketing around it, and there's a lot of branding and a lot of claims. So we're going to dig to the bottom of the science today. Did you know, first of all, the most famous one, that lion's mane mushroom has been repeatedly shown to improve regrowth of nerves and protect nerve damage? This is especially poignant after something like a stroke or diabetes or any kind of progressive illness that damages nerves. And next, that simply sniffing rosemary and peppermint has been shown to improve working memory, learning, and alertness, which is really good if you're taking an exam. It definitely improves memory recall, especially if you're smelling it whilst you're trying to remember this information, and then smell it just before you recall that information. There's a strong association between smell and memory, which we know because it plays a big role in nostalgia as well. And then finally, bacosides and Bacopa monnieri have shown to support nerve cell development. Okay, herbs protect cognition and the brain in many different ways. I've narrowed it down to about 6 different ways. This is not the 6, it's my 6, the 6 that I've noticed. So number 1 that we're going to talk about is neuroprotective. Number 2 is going to be neurotransmitter conduction, so how these herbs have an effect on neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine, as well as acetylcholine as well, which plays a role in Parkinson's and dementia. Then number 3, we have cerebrocirculation, so actually bringing more blood to the brain. Number 4 is neurogenesis, so that's that example of the lion's mane, where the herb actually helps to regrow the nerves. Obviously can't bring them back from the dead, but it can support regrowth where there is potential to be regrown. Number 5 is a little bit secondary, but it's still important to consider when you're focusing on cognition. So we have stress, mood, and adaptogenic effects. So we know that when we're stressed and we have a bad mood, our cognition is affected. So that could be something to consider if you're working around improving your cognition, and herbs can definitely help with that. The last one's a little bit tenuous. It's the gut-brain barrier or the gut-brain axis. And okay, it's not directly to cognition, but we know that when we have digestive issues, or we have a stomach flu, or we've just had a massive meal, then our cognition is not working as it normally is. So that's another thing to consider, and we're going to be talking about prebiotics and the gut microbiome as well at the end. So let's start with neuroprotective and what that means. Well, it doesn't really mean anything. It's so vague, and people can get away with using it for so many different things. Generally, it's obviously just that it protects the neurons from some damage. This could be through antioxidants, so preventing oxidation, which I just want to put a little footnote that there's so much hype around antioxidants and preventing inflammation, but oxidation and inflammation is just a byproduct of living. It happens. Yes, anti-inflammatories and antioxidants are beneficial, but it shouldn't be the primary focus if you're generally healthy, just because it is a natural byproduct, and it does serve a purpose as well, especially the inflammation. Anyway, back on track. This neuroprotective action could also be through protecting nerve growth factor, through improving the growth of nerve and synapses, through modulating neurotransmitters, or just through the general protection of cell and mitochondrial health. It's a vague term, but it's rooted in history and tradition, and these herbs have been really associated with memory and cognition for forever, especially rosemary. Rosemary is associated, well, back in the old days, is associated with the memory of dead ancestors. So it's really linked with this remembrance. And I think there's a lot to be said for tradition and the associations that have prevailed through time. There is something in that. So for just general neuroprotection, which we won't go deep into because, as I said, it's a really vague term. There's not any studies that I know of that use the term neuroprotective as a general term. But you might want to include Bacopa monnieri, Ginkgo biloba, Hericium erinaceus, which is lion's mane, Hypericum perforatum, which is St. John's wort, Rosmarinus, Scutellaria bicalensis, and Gotucola. So next we're going to talk about neurotransmitter conduction, which it's a little bit more specific, well, a lot more specific. Some herbs actually affect the activity and behavior of neurotransmitters, such as improving GABA, L-DOPA, acetylcholine, glutamate, and serotonin. Each transmitter plays a different role in cognition, mood, and protection of the brain. Let's start with the most famous, which is GABA. Lots of people have heard about GABA because it's this neuron that helps us to relax and to sleep. Passion flower is definitely the most famous herb associated with improving GABA. So GABA, let's talk about GABA. GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain, and it's responsible for reducing neuronal excitability and promoting relaxation. When GABA is activated, it relaxes, and this is the neurotransmitter we want more of in cases of anxiety, stress, insomnia, which could induce brain fog or poor cognition. Passion flower supports GABA, induces relaxation, and in this way might relieve brain fog and help us to think clearer. I say might because there's not any research that proves that, but it definitely supports anxiety. Then there's the effects on L-DOPA. L-DOPA is a dopamine precursor, and we all know what dopamine is technically, well, popularly thought to do. But dopamine also plays a role in spasms in Parkinson's. And L-DOPA is the drug of choice in supporting spasms in Parkinson's. Mucuna pruriens actually contains L-DOPA and has been clinically proven to equal the effectiveness of isolated L-DOPA. Okay, so that could play a role in reducing spasms. It could definitely play a massive role in Parkinson's and can play a role. This is verging into more energetic herbal medicine, so it could play a role in reducing that spasms in the systems that are not real spasms, but they are anxiety, tension, this kind of this through this action on this neurotransmitter, mucuna pruriens can help to reduce that. It's worth remembering with all of this that everything is highly theoretical. The science behind cognitive decline, including Parkinson's, is still theory. The science behind the mechanisms of action in the plants are still theory, and the way that the two match up are obviously still a big theory. It's also worth remembering that these plants have not been plucked from nowhere. As I said before, they've been recognised in the scientific community for their long traditional use in cognition, long before science isolated them. And so although it's just theory, history is on their side. Okay, next we're going to talk about cerebral circulation. So this is one that might apply more generally to people. So cerebrocirculation is a term used a lot in herbal medicine, but it's less clinically recognised, so probably won't be noted in many studies. The term cerebrocirculation, it just means bringing more blood flow to the brain. Generally, the link between poor cognition and poor cerebral blood flow is a traditional unempirical concept, and not much research connects those specific dots in the way that traditional herbal medicine does. Studies that look at pro-cognitive herbs don't tend to look at cerebral blood flow as a cause of the poor cognition. However, herbal medicine massively recognises this benefit of improving nutrient and blood delivery to the brain on cognition. So just to highlight that separation between the studies, the clinical studies, and the way that Western traditional herbal medicine views that. So Bacopa monnieri and Ginkgo biloba have been shown to increase blood flow without changing blood pressure in rats, and this has been suggested as a reason for its pro-cognitive effects. Bacopa is a traditional Ayurvedic medicine indicated in conditions associated with weak flow to the head, such as dementia, brain fog, ADHD, and anxiety. And yes, we do group anxiety in this because in this traditional system of Ayurveda and traditional herbal medicine, it's seen as reduced cerebral blood flow, causing tension. So that's an interesting point. If we wanted to treat anxiety in herbal medicine or in a traditional medicine system, we would look at herbs like this to bring better blood flow to the brain, because the sort of energetic thinking is that there is not clinically obvious reduced blood flow to the brain. It's more of an energetic thing, and when there's less, it kind of gets tense, like and then you get the anxiety. This is what I was mentioning earlier about this sort of energetic spasms. Can be expressed as anxiety or restlessness or twitching, or this would be seen as reduced blood flow to an area. There have been lots of research over the years on Brahmi and Bacopa. They're very popular. And here's the results of some. Most of these results have been done with extract over 12 or more weeks. Number 1, we've got Bacopa extract daily for 12 weeks, improved measures of verbal learning, memory, and information processing. Number 2, we've got improved measures of verbal learning, memory, and retention in healthy adults over 55 years of age. And number 3, there's a study in children aged 6 to 8 years taking 1 teaspoon of Bacopa extract 3 times a day for 3 months, improved visual motor function and immediate memory compared to pre-treatment. That's pretty confident. That's pretty good. So that's for Bacopa and Brahmi, which are both Ayurvedic herbs. Another study looked at the effects of resveratrol on cerebral blood flow and cognition. Resveratrol is a compound isolated normally from pine. Pine is traditionally used for cerebrocirculation, cognition, and memory in a similar way to rosemary. They are not quite interchangeable, but they kind of, when it comes to cognition, they are fairly interchangeable here. The study showed that blood flow improved or was modulated, but there was no change in cognitive function, which is interesting. Ginkgo is another impressive one as well, which is also really popular in the research. We'll talk about that in a little more depth later. It has 400 plus published studies on it. So this one is a very popular one. Next is neurogenesis. So this is when it comes down to actual damage to the nerves, which could come from many causes, including, as I mentioned before, stroke, diabetes, or just an injury, just a traumatic injury as well. Did you know that pharmaceuticals for stimulating nerve growth are in their infancy? But there are effective and traditionally clinically backed herbs that can support nerve regrowth. So in traditional herbal medicine, they're a little bit a step ahead of being able to support the regeneration of these nerves. Although nerve damage is unlikely to be the cause of your brain fog and poor cognition, that's not the first place I'd be thinking if you have brain fog or poor cognition. It's not likely nerve damage. In some cases, it could be due to something like MS, chronic neuroinflammation, chronic vitamin B deficiencies, which is a big one. You'd probably be getting other symptoms as well that would help you to indicate towards that. It's not just going to be, oh my gosh, I have poor cognition, maybe I'm vitamin B deficient. There's a lot more that goes around that as well. But it is worth noting that these vitamin B deficiencies can lead to nerve damage. Also, post-viral nerve damage is a big one as well, which we are seeing in COVID, and just traumatic crash injuries too. In general, I do want to emphasise that neurodegeneration being the cause of your cognitive issues is probably not likely. But if you know anyone with these likely causes, not just brain fog, then this might be helpful. So, much of the herbs beneficial for neurogenesis are generally neuroprotective overall anyway, and there's no harm in anyone taking them. Obviously, some of them do have contraindications with pharmaceutical drugs, so definitely check that before you start. So one of the pharmacological agents used in nerve regrowth is nerve growth factor, NGF. This is how lion's mane works. As we said in the beginning, lion's mane promotes nerve neurogenesis by stimulating the production of nerve growth factor, which is a protein crucial for the growth, maintenance, and survival of neurons. Compounds in lion's mane, such as hericenones and erinacines, have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier, which is really uncommon for herbs to be able to do, and enhance nerve growth factor synthesis. This leads to increased neurogenesis and neuroprotection of these nerves. This activity supports cognitive function and may aid in the recovery from neurological injuries and conditions. A little side story of myself. I took lion's mane for 3 months after I had COVID-induced nerve pain and brain fog, and it worked amazing. So good. It took me, a while to realise that this nerve pain I was getting throughout my whole body, starting in my stomach, was COVID-induced. But I do believe it was COVID-induced. Happy to be proven wrong. But either way, the lion's mane for 3 months really sorted it out when nothing else could. I was taking painkillers every day. I've been to the doctor, they couldn't help me. Lion's mane did. So I'm a big fan of lion's mane. Obviously, anecdotal evidence is not evidence. St. John's wort is another one that may support nerve growth. It's certainly traditionally applied to nerve damage cases and inflamed nerves like sciatica. So that's one that I would think of straight away if you have sciatica, is St. John's wort. It helps to regrow the nerves, calm them down, stop the inflammation. Goji berry, surprisingly, also improves neuronal structure and integrity, though nothing shows that it promotes regeneration like lion's mane does. Okay, so then we're on to the last two bits. We've got stress and mood and general adaptogenic effects. Commonly, our cognitive health is affected by stress. We all know the feeling of not being able to focus or learn when we're stressed or anxious, or even just feeling just generally down. It might have something to do with the fact that the sympathetic nervous system, activated in stress and anxiety, is dysregulated in low moods and is not conducive to learning and memory formation. So when we're stressed and we're anxious, we have this sympathetic nervous system response, which is not conducive to us learning or remembering anything. Hormones can also play a role as well. We know that estrogen is part of learning, memory and cognition, and with various imbalances and natural fluctuations throughout a woman's month, specifically a woman's month, and also in menopause, we can see how cognition is easily tied to hormonal health. I know personally, another anecdotal story, I definitely get more sharp, think really clearly around probably ovulation, and then I get really dreamy and muggy headed around my period. So that's just another example. If you have a hormonal imbalance, that's definitely going to have a role in how you think. Adaptogens. Time to talk about adaptogens. They're the most popular group of herbs in the marketing world for sure. They are really amazing. Original research started on these in the Russian, I can't remember what, in Russia, and they wanted to find herbs that specifically could support their soldiers on enduring long journeys and difficult adjures. And they've been very well researched, and they have a very specific category of what counts as an adaptogen. One of the key parts of adaptogens is that they are safe, and they're safe to take long term. So they're generally safe for everybody because that's by definition what they have to be. But as always, they do interact with some pharmaceuticals as well. So definitely check that. They specifically balance hormones and balance adaptive stress response. The key is that they don't force it one way or another way, they balance it, which is what Western clinical medicine cannot understand or accept, or has no framework for understanding, is that these herbs are amphoteric. You can take the exact same thing, and if your nervous system is not responding well enough, it's too low, then these herbs will help it to come back to the middle ground. If it's over responding, such as in anxiety or depression or whatever, it's over responding, the same thing will bring it back to the middle. There's no framework for this in orthodox clinical Western medicine, so it's a very herbalist arena. So one review states on adaptogens that the beneficial stress protective effect of adaptogens is related to regulation of homeostasis by several mechanisms of action associated with the HPA axis. that's the key part, and the control of key mediators of stress response such as molecular chaperones. They increase the state of non-specific resistance in stress and decrease sensitivity to stressors, which results in stress protection and prolong the phase of resistance. Okay, so that's just the statement from one review on adaptogens. Basically, these bring the body back into its natural balance and regulate the stress response. So for cognition specifically, the key indicated adaptogens include bacopa, as we mentioned before, lion's mane, as we mentioned before, tulsi, which is holy basil, ashwagandha and gotu kola, although likely every adaptogen will have an effect on cognition at the hormonal stress response level. I'm going to look a little bit closer at bacopa and tulsi quickly, and then we'll go on to the gut-brain axis. So one meta-analysis concluded that bacopa shows positive effects on cognition, most especially on speed of attention and reaction time. Several studies within this showed an improvement in memory and cognition after 6 weeks or more of treatment. However, one study did show that acute effects of bacopa on cognition are nil, but adaptogens are not acute medicine. So that's the key here. Never in traditional use has an adaptogen been applied short term. The study is invalid from this traditional perspective. So this study showed that taken in short term, bacopa does not have an effect. That does not mean that bacopa does not have an effect. It means you're using it wrong. Traditionally, bacopa is taken, and all adaptogens are taken for 2-3 months longer to build up and actually have an effect. So there is evidence that they don't work, but I would really question whether they're using them in the right traditional way. The effects of bacopa may have something to do with balancing GABA and other neurotransmitters like acetylcholine. Then for holy basil, there's also evidence of its positive effect on cognition. One study that used a Fitbit, perceived stress scale and insomnia scale, profile of mood questionnaire, quality of sleep questionnaire, cortisol levels and stress response measures found that holy basil improved quality of sleep, quality of cognition and perceived and subjective stress. Again, this was over 8 weeks, just as adaptogens should be taken. So there is clearly really good results from taking holy basil on sleep, cognition and perceived and subjective stress. This was taken in the correct way over 8 weeks, 2 months. So unsurprising there. Finally, let's move on to the gut-brain axis. Okay, there is not enough evidence to definitively say that the gut microbiome I've said that twice now, alters cognition, but there is certainly enough to say that it's likely. And we all individually know that this is true. We felt it, like I said before. We know that this is true. Microbes in the gut microbiome are responsible for providing enzymes that synthesize essential nutrients for digestion and extracting nutrients from our food. They're also responsible for supporting detoxification, for supporting production of hormones, and so much more, all of which has an effect on how we think. So these are the reasons why the gut microbiome is likely to affect our cognition as well. One study looked at the link between taking an inulin prebiotic and cognition markers like memory recall and mood with positive effect. So that was beneficial. The inulin prebiotic, which is found in Chicory sanctum, which is chicory, and Inula helenium, which is elecampane. These are very high in inulin prebiotic. Taking probiotics, which is different from prebiotics, that's a whole other subject, led to an increase in the activity of certain genes in the brain, specifically NMDARs and BDNFs, which are responsible for memory and learning and the growth and integrity of neurons. So that was just one study that I found on that one. The reason that we're mentioning prebiotics is because there are many herbs with prebiotic effects, including herbs with inulin as a primary constituent. Again, there is no definitive evidence of this link, but it is likely a well-backed hypothesis. I would put money on the fact that they're going to prove this in the future, in the near future. That prebiotic-rich herbs support the gut microbiome and in turn support cognition through that. One study looked at a multi-herbal formula including bacopa, gotu kola, turmeric, which is not specifically cognitive focused, reishi, again not specifically cognitive focused, rosemary definitely is cognitive focused, cardamom, holy basil, and green tea. The results after 90 days increased speed of cognitive task performance. So I want to finish there with this specific formula. I really like that formula. It's got all of the ones, or a lot of the ones that we spoke about today. If you wanted to make a pro-cognitive formula at home, I would start with these really well researched herbs. Ginkgo biloba, which I forgot to mention. I will do a whole other video on ginkgo biloba. Basically, it improves blood flow to the brain, and there's a lot of potential in, and a lot of research for its potential in dementia as well. So ginkgo is amazing for cognition, and it's the most well studied. Then we have Bacopa monnieri, goticola, and rosemary, holy basil. I'd say that's a really amazing tincture mix that you can make there. Please obviously check the interactions with any pharmaceuticals that you're on, and remember that a lot of this is just theory, but it's good theory. It's backed theory, and it's rooted in history. So open to any questions, and thank you.